In our last few sessions, we explored the broad area of psychoanalysis and Indian tradition, and we did so with a focus on first Yoga Sutras, then Brahma Sutras, then Upanishads, and today we'll take a concise look, a very concise look on Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita is a book on which commentaries upon commentaries have been made over centuries. Each line or sutra of Bhagavad Gita, each chapter calls for a commentary which goes into hours to really explain what the line means. Every statement is profound, deep, loaded with meaning. Today, in our limited lecture, we can only take a very concise view. And specifically, from a psychoanalytic standpoint, in the spirit of study, compare, contrast, synthesize. So we'll not go into each school of psychoanalysis, each concept of psychoanalysis, and then bring it to Bhagavad Gita, nor the other way around. In an hour or an hour and a half that we have, we will do a concise study, compare, contrast, synthesis in a consolidated approach. Let us start with knowing the Bhagavad Gita, its location in Hindu spirituality. In Hindu spirituality, the spiritual texts are broadly classified into two: the Shruti and the Smruti. Shruti refers to those spiritual texts that have not been composed by any person and handed over to the other person. They have been revealed, heard by certain rishis. In the sense, they don't have, or it is believed that they don't have, a human author. They are revelations from something suprahuman, and the Veda and the Upanishads, they are the Shrutis. Vedas particularly are referred to as the Shrutis. Some will dispute that because Upanishads have been created by somebody we know, the author is clearly known, a human author, they are not Shrutis. And some will say that the content of Upanishad was revealed, not achieved by a human effort, and therefore they should be treated as Shrutis. But on the Vedas, there can be no doubt, and because the Upanishads also come out of the Vedas, the third part of the Vedas, Upanishads usually are also treated as the Shrutis. So the source of Vedas and Upanishads is suprahuman. They are not human creations. So they are referred to as Shrutis. Smriti refers to something created by a human being, even if it is God in the human form, and then handed down over to others for onward transmission. The Gita, Yoga Sutras, Brahma Sutras, they all come under Smritis. I should mention here Brahma Sutras also. Of all the Shrutis and Smritis, three are specially important in Hindu spirituality. The Upanishads, the Brahma Sutras, and the Gita, they are referred to as the Prasthan Trayi. Trayi is three books, and Prasthan is something that enables you to be free from this world and move out of this world of compulsive birth and rebirth. So the three books which help you to attain nirvana, moksha, Brahma, any sort of word you use for enlightenment. The three books are the Upanishads, the Brahma Sutras, and the Gita. So we can see how important Gita has been even in the traditional Hindu spirituality sense. Apart from this traditional reverence, Gita has been thought of by most people as something that synthesizes Hindu spirituality into a synthetic comprehensive whole. It accepts all approaches of Hindu spirituality, Hindu philosophy, and distills wisdom, extracts the core out of it, and puts it as one path towards enlightenment. Gita is a spiritual and not a religious book. Often people make a mistake. They call Bhagavad Gita a religious book. It's not a religious book, it's a spiritual book. There's nothing religious about in this book. One reading and it will be clear to you, it's not a religious book, it's a spiritual book. It has 18 chapters and 700 verses written in Sanskrit. The 18 chapters, they are like thematic discussions on various themes of spirituality and philosophy. It's a very thematic book. It presents to us a concentrated extract of wisdom spread across Hindu spirituality. That is what makes it one of the richest books. Gita is found as a part of the epic Mahabharata, written by Vedvyas. Historical dates on which there is no consensus. I have read all kinds of historical dates of when the Gita was spoken. And the range is from 200 BC to 7500 BC. And the dating of Gita is a part of larger dating of Mahabharata and Ramayana. And experts use astrological, astronomical references archaeological evidences. At any rate, it is a very ancient text. It's one of the greatest books always commented upon. It's one of the books on which highest number of commentaries would be there. In recent times, we have Swami Vivekananda and Sri Aurobindo extensively commenting on Bhagavad Gita. A few centuries back, Adi Shankaracharya commented upon Bhagavad Gita. These are among the most respected of commentaries. Sri Aurobindo has written extensively in his book Essays on the Gita, which takes a thematic commentary exposition on Gita. In the Indian tradition, if you comment credibly and profoundly on the three books, the Prasthantrayi, only then you are accepted as an Acharya. So these three books have a special significance in Hindu culture. And the book is a holy book spoken in a battlefield, which is a very unique situation. We don't find any other holy book in the world that makes its advent in the middle of a battlefield. Gita is a book Krishna pronounces to Arjuna. So Krishna becomes the guru and Arjuna is the disciple. The book is thematic, largely thematic. It moves largely in a thematic way, dealing with themes like Vishad Yoga. Vishad is depression, dejection, near to Vairagya. The real word is Karpanya. It moves then into different forms of yoga. Sannyas yoga, karma yoga, bhakti yoga, jnana yoga. And then moves to the center of the whole thing. The goal of life, the sthita prajna, which is the center of the book. What is the goal of life? And once you reach that goal, what is the state in which you live? How do you elaborate the goal of life? How do you reach there? And once you reach there, how do you live? The book also talks about karma and the significance of the world. It's very important. The book accepts the concept of soul, accepts the concept of one reality behind all manifestation and manifesting in all manifestation. So Gita accepts the immanence of one reality in all manifestation, not just reality being the ground of all manifestation, but also being immanent in manifestation. Gita accepts the concept of soul, the concept of rebirth, the concept of karma, the law of karma, and very importantly, the significance of the world. Gita does not reject the historical world as secondary, inferior, or just as an obstacle, like many schools do, particularly the Buddhist approach, the Jain approach, Shankaracharya's approach, Madhavacharya's approach, where this material world is seen as secondary, more of an obstacle that one has to free oneself from. Rather, Gita sees this world also as significant, where goodness and values have to be established and maintained, even if force has to be used. So Gita is a book of struggle in the world, which is significant. The world is not secondary. The world is not just an obstacle to be freed oneself from, but the world is as important as the inner world, and the outer world has to be enhanced and taken towards perfection as far as possible, just as the inner world has to be taken to. So the equal significance of the inner and the outer world. The inner takes precedence in chronology. In general, unless there is an emergency in the outer world. But the significance is equal even if chronologically, in a usual ordinary sense, the inner may take precedence over the outer. Each spiritual schools in the Hindu tradition after Gita has been referring to the Gita to establish its own principles. In fact, most spiritual schools actually extract much of their principles from the Gita, and they also appeal to the Gita as an authority to establish their own statements, their own contentions, their own schools. So before Gita, what used to be the Veda, the gold standard to which arguments were referred to for validity, the similar kind of status now the Gita has, that subsequent schools of spirituality, more often than not, refer to the Gita as a gold standard to prove or disprove something. Each school extracts what it wants and tries to almost hijack Gita. And the spiritual circus is entertaining in the least and ridiculous at the worst. When we look at some of the attempts to hijack Gita to one's own purpose, some of the attempts are outlandishly ridiculous. The Gita is so rich that one can draw from it selectively to prove something, and this is used by schools as different as they can be. Shankaracharya draws from Gita to strengthen his argument of Advait Vedanta, Jagat Mithya Brahma Satya. The International Society for Krishna Consciousness draws upon Gita to prove its philosophy of Dvait and the primacy of the path of devotion, Bhakti Marg. Sri Aurobindo refers to Gita as he talks about integral yoga. Everyone draws upon Gita. Swami Vivekananda draws upon Gita. And similarly, most spiritual schools draw upon Gita, and many of them even appeal to the authority of Gita to establish some statement or principle. What are the core concepts? The core concepts that we find in Gita can be listed in many ways. Subjectively, I have put up 15 themes, 15 points. The first important concept is it is about man in the battle of life, that life is a struggle. We all wish to go back to what in psychoanalysis we would call bliss at the breast. But reality is different. Just as psychoanalysis says, we have to accept reality as a strugglesome reality. So Bhagavad Gita paints the same picture of man in the battle of life, that the planet Earth is so designed that human history always will be a history of struggle. The Gita talks about continuing the struggle, not renunciation of struggle. It accepts renunciation as a path to enlightenment, but does not prescribe that as a principle for everyone. It's an exception, not the rule. Gita does not believe in the absolutism of non-violence or absolutism of peace or compassion or absolutism of literal ethics. Gita goes into the idea of violence being inevitable in the human world, and the violence has to be for a just cause, for dharma. Similarly, destruction of the evil is inevitable and necessary. There is no injunction against destruction or violence. Gita accepts the concept of soul, indestructibility and immortality of the soul, and the soul residing in the body. And that creates a very different structure of the human integer and a very different model of the mind compared to psychoanalysis, which is based more on the materialist philosophy, materialism. Gita accepts the paths of knowledge, devotion, action, multiplicity of paths, very holistic and open, like Yoga Sutras. Gita shares many things with Yoga Sutras, and one of the things is openness and the holistic approach to self-development. So the Gita accepts the paths of knowledge, devotion, and action, accepts the path of involvement in the world as well as the path of sannyasa. Gita accepts one reality manifesting as many. It does not take a strict Dvait position or a strict Advait position, because both Dvait and Advait schools, they both agree on one reality manifesting as many, but both differ on whether the manifest can go back to the source and merge into it, or remain separate, always remain separate from the source, having once come out of it. Gita values very highly experience of that oneness. There is a very famous statement, Vasudevam idam sarvam, sa mahatma sa durlabham. I'm not sure if I recite it right in Sanskrit, but something on those lines. What it means is it is very valuable to experience oneness behind all seemingly different manifestations, not just conceptually, but experientially. So when experientially one experiences the oneness in all existence, that experience is highly valued by Gita. And the Gita says a person who experiences such a oneness experientially is very rare and valuable to find. Gita calls that person a great person, Mahatma. Of course, we have started using the word Mahatma very liberally, devalued the word. Gita also talks about design in existence, that we are not dealing with a reality that is a blank canvas, a tabul rasa. In Gita, Krishna says to Arjuna at a point that even if you don't do certain things, even then it will happen anyway, I will get it done anyway. By that he refers to a design in existence, that the broad goalposts in the journey of existence are fixed. Human free will has an impact, but it has a limited impact on shifting those goalposts. And this design in existence will then go into the design element that we find not only in the biological nature, not only in evolution, not only in food chain, not only in evolution, but also in human history, evolution of different societies, what we call the spirit of the age, one spirit of the age following another according to some design. And that will also go into the design of journey of the individual, therefore the design of his mind and the law of karma at work. Once you accept the argument of design in existence, it goes down to the human psyche. Because then the human psyche and human life becomes a part of a much larger enterprise. Gita implicitly implies theory of many universes. Especially in one chapter where Arjuna sees existence coming out of non-existence and existence going back into non-existence. Gita doesn't go into the relationship between the transcendent and the manifest. Even if it may imply many universes, doesn't say much about the transcendent. Probably it has been left for yet to come Gita, maybe after a few hundred or thousand years. Gita also refers to the same knowledge coming again and again in the human cycle. When Krishna says the same knowledge was given thousands of years back, some people go to the extent of crores of years back, and the same knowledge coming back again. So in the sense, there is a enduring knowledge over the human life cycle. So long as human beings find themselves in the same nature of things outside and inside, this knowledge is eternal to that reference. Gita talks about working without any self-interest, which is contrary to pleasure maximizing theories of the West, including psychoanalysis. And the Gita talks about joyful working without expectation of result. That is how you can get out of the compulsive chain of pleasure and pain and be in a state of bliss, delight, and joy, which are causeless. That is where one is free from pain, at the same time productive for oneself and others. And Gita talks about the pursuit of excellence. Very few religious, or I should not call it religious at all, very few spiritual texts talk about pursuit of excellence in work. But for Gita, this is one of the central points, pursuit of excellence in work. And life is seen as a sacrifice in the holy fires of existence, yagna of existence. Not the holy fire, translation of yagna can be, it's a holy fire in a holy ceremony. It's the nearest that occurs to me. So the significance of life, even the ordinary parts of life, is seen as a significant sacrifice into the yagna of existence. These are the 15 core ideas thematically that appeal to me. Each of us can have a different list of what are the core concepts. With this background, let us now go to our core point, psychoanalysis and Bhagavad Gita. One approach is to go into psychoanalysis of human characters that I would leave for the first year students. I would rather go for thematic analysis, deeper and more profound. From a structural standpoint, Gita accepts the concept of soul and therefore reincarnation and design in existence. And this would recreate the model of the mind that we have if we bring it into psychoanalysis. Once we accept design in existence, we will go towards Carl Jung or Erik Erikson or somebody who gets into the idea of design of human life, the program of life. Because design of existence will inevitably link it up to the design of human life. It will also link up to the spirit of the age and social design, which will tell us that the social situations which are emerging are not just accidents, but part of some design, which we don't understand at present, but the design is at work. How does the design work and why only this design and why not something else? That can be deciphered only if you understand that in terms of elementals, which we don't. At present, we don't. Gita accepts significance of all approaches, all the three: cognition, affect, and behavior. It's a very holistic approach. Unlike psychoanalysis, which puts more emphasis on affect, and unlike CBT, CT, DBT, which focuses more on cognition, and unlike the behavioral part, which focuses on behavior, Gita accepts all the three. In the sense, it has a very holistic approach, very much on lines of Yoga Sutras. Yoga Sutras also has a holistic approach. And this is something to my taste. Using all the three approaches based on what works best in a situation and what gets you results. Gita puts a very important emphasis on observation of the self, like Sankhya and like Yoga Sutras, like Vipassana in the Buddhist literature. In psychoanalysis, we are now talking about the observing ego and the participating ego. In mindfulness, we are using the same concept with different words. In biofeedback approaches, we used to have the same thing done more on biological events. And this is a very important concept in Gita. My personal feeling is it can be made use of and made more central in psychoanalysis than we do. And elevate the intellectual observation that develops insight into a more spiritual observation that helps us overcome the fundamental desire itself to some extent. Sublimation of the lower to work for the higher. It's a very important part of both Gita and psychoanalysis, that certain parts of the personality cannot be transformed completely. They have to be sublimated. They cannot be transformed at the roots. They have to be sublimated and work for the sake of the higher. Almost like superego using parts of id for its own purposes. Gita talks about karma and limited determinism. That we are neither in a situation of absolute free will nor in a situation of absolute determinism. There is free will and there is partial determinism. There is free will and there is effect of past karma. And every birth, incarnation that we take is not only for settling the karmic debt, but apart from settling the karmic debt partly, part of the life also is for new experiences, the soul journey. So it is both soul journey of fresh experiences and settling of the karmic debt. Both are at work in life, and the karmic debt and the karmic effect need not be deterministic. A part of the karma which is very heavy would be deterministic, but other parts of the karma can be overcome by intelligent efforts. So part of the karma is unavoidable, part of the karma can be got rid of in different ways. pursuit of excellence and pursuit of joyful work without results, something very different from psychoanalysis. An important element that comes up is the surrender to existence in Gita, which we don't find in psychoanalysis at all. Sri Aurobindo talks about it, that you are in the middle of solving some problem of the inner world. You are halfway through and you just give it to existence or God to solve the rest of it. And this often happens. We take up a problem, we solve half of it, and then we forget, and at some time we find the problem has been completely solved. Psychoanalysis would say the healthy part of the unconscious has solved the problem, taken it to completion. So this can also be used in psychoanalysis. If we interpret it in psychoanalysis, we would say it is surrender to the inner omnipotent object. The inner omnipotent all good object, we in the inner world, we surrender to that object, the problem that we have, and that problem, that omnipotent inner object, good omnipotent inner object solves the problem for us or takes it to completion if it has been partially solved. The most important concept in Bhagavad Gita is the concept of Sthita Prajna, the enlightened person. And in details, Arjuna asks about it. Who is the person like? How does he walk? How does he talk? What does he do? What is enlightenment? And here Krishna gives a very elaborate description of the free man, the Sthita Prajna. Literally, it means Prajna is wisdom. Sthit, the Sthit Prajna, a person who is poised in wisdom, whose wisdom is anchored, unwavering, who has anchored himself at the height of wisdom, highest height of wisdom, and is unwavering. One of the most valuable and central concepts of the Gita, the idea of the Sthita Prajna. The Sthita Prajna is an enlightened person where his wisdom is anchored at the peak. Mind poised in wisdom. One more interpretation. Steady wisdom anchored at the peak. Another way of looking at it. Anchored in the highest wisdom. Anchored in spiritual freedom. Sri Aurobindo goes on to define very elaborately the definition of a free man. And in modern times, we have heard about these definitions from Krishnamurti, OSHO Rajneesh, and many others. What is important for psychoanalysis is that this is a goal for Bhagavad Gita and Hindu spirituality, enlightenment. Two important points come up. One, that this is the goal. Psychoanalysis does not have a goal of its own. It is goal agnostic. It supports the person to find his goal. Hindu spirituality and Bhagavad Gita are different on this point. They have a clear goal in mind, the goal of enlightenment. And in this goal of enlightenment, it's a state of no thought, no affect, no fear, no desire, high awareness and bliss. It can lead you, not necessarily always, but it can lead you into mystical realms, mystical powers. And this redefines the limits of human potential. Psychoanalysis is very conservative on the limits of human potential. Freud used to say the goal of psychoanalysis is to make unbearable unhappiness into bearable unhappiness. Freedom from pain, freedom from discontent is not possible in the framework of psychoanalysis or Western psychology. East is different. Gita says the limits of human potential are far wider, and it is possible to be free from attachment, from pain, from strange hold of desire, also from rebirth, the compulsion to be born again. And the goal is the goal of enlightenment. Once you reach there, these freedoms are achieved. So this is something completely different from psychoanalysis. Long way before psychoanalysis would even consider this as a possibility and explore it, leave alone appreciate it or bring it into the center. So when we look at all of this, the model of the mind, pathogenesis, healing technique, goal of life, limits of human potential, all these 5 core areas of psychoanalysis will undergo a change. Philosophy of psychoanalysis, metapsychology also would undergo a change, a radical change actually, if we bring in concepts of Gita into psychoanalysis. Thank you.